Hello everybody, this is TipTopMTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I am going to be breaking down every spoiler that came out today being October 29th, for Commander Legends. I'm going to talk about the new cards, the reprints, all of that, and give you my thoughts on them, whether it be from a limited perspective or from a Commander perspective as a whole. I'm not really going to be talking about Legacy or Vintage, even though these do become legal in those formats. This product was designed for Commander, and so that's what I'm going to be primarily talking about. Why don't we actually just jump right into this? There's a decent amount of them today, so let's jump in. Starting off, we have this card. It is Ninth Bridge Patrol, which is a 2-cost white creature dwarf soldier 1/1, and it says whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it's going to really reward you for either having your creatures killed, flickering your creatures, doing some weird, flickering of your creatures, making them, leave your control and go to an opponent. It's going to kind of boost all of that. Now, this is a reprint from Kaladesh, so I don't really need to talk about its impact. It's also a common. In, the set, what does it kind of show? Well, I actually think Flicker may be one of the, 2-color mechanics, because generally, whenever there's a set, especially one based around limited, each 2-color combination has a theme to it, and I would not be surprised if white blue's scrying and flyers, white something else is gonna be flickery, but we shall see. Next, we have this card, which is Core Cardiographer. It's a 4-cost white creature core scout, and when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So just really good in a mono white deck, just because they really don't get access to that. First off, it's not a basic plains, which is just really good. If you're in a Boros deck, you can kind of just go get your Boros lands with this. Generally, it's pretty good, especially for white. It was last reprinted in Zendikar Rising Commander, so I don't know how much it really needed a reprint, but it's a common, and it will help kind of fill out the colors to make sure they're all equally balanced. Next, we have Captain's Call. It's a 4-cost white sorcery, and it says create 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. So this is just generally a good effect. If you want lots of tokens, it gets you there. It's not the most efficient thing in the world. If it was instant, I would say this is a really good card. Obviously, again, it's a reprint. There's a lot of reprints today. You will notice that overall, I think it hints obviously towards a token theme in white and green, and we will see that as we move throughout the set more. Next, we have Doomed Traveler. It's a 1-cost white creature human soldier 1/1, and when it dies, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So this is good for any deck that wants to have its creatures be killed, and the first card's really going to like this. It'll put a counter on itself, and it also then creates tokens for token decks. This is one of those cards that fits multiple themes if they're in the set, and I think that's probably why it was included, not because it's super good in Commander or anything. Next, we have a brand new card. This one is a partner, not a companion. Ooh, that would be terrifying. Keller's Sumane Familiar. It's a 2-cost white legendary creature horse 1/1, and whenever a commander you control attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on Keller's, and it has partner. First off, Keller's, if it's your commander, whenever it attacks, it's getting a +1/+1 counter. So it's kind of just a 2/2 for 2 in white. It's kind of boring, but because it has that partner, you may be able to combine it with something that cares about counters. We've had even the 2-color partners, the original ones. A couple of those cared about counters. Some of them cared about attacking, and with all the new partners that are coming out, there's bound to be someone who works somewhat well with this, whether it be when you attack, you have to remove a counter from a creature, and if you do, it gains indestructible, and then boom, Kellers can now just always swing and be indestructible. So I'm not saying that's a card, but there are probably going to be little synergies that you can do with the partner mechanic, and that's kind of the hard part, is I can tell you my thoughts on this partner right now, but it really doesn't mean anything because of that partner ability. Yes, this could be a really good card, but and it's not that great of a card, but if it doesn't have a good partner to go with, no one's really going to play it. Similarly, this could be a pretty meh card, but maybe there's some partner that just perfectly works with it in such a way that they synergize really well together and they become really good. So again, I can't really tell you right now, hey, this partner is good. I would have to see all of the partners, and that may be a video I do after. I'm going to do my favorite partner commanders, but maybe I could do a separate one where I talk about kind of each partner and what they kind of synergize with. And that could be an interesting one where I break down, I think there's 50 partners, to break down all 60 partners, because including the old ones, and then say, hey, here are the best partners to go with them. If you guys want to see that, let me know in the comments. I will do that. That sounds actually a lot of fun. So next we have this card, which is Patron of the Valiant. It's a 5-cost white creature angel with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So you'll notice throughout these white cards, and it seems like they're giving each color a day. I believe the first day was blue, second day was black. Today seems, actually, there was a third day. What was yesterday? Yesterday was some color, and today seems to be white, if you look at the number of spoilers, and it kind of seems to be showcasing the theme. So we have, like, creatures, dying, tokens, and now +1/+1 counters. This was a Jumpstart card, so it really didn't need a reprint. It is clearly here for limited. If you see anything that was reprinted in the last year, it probably wasn't there to be a good reprint. It's there to kind of fill out the limited pool. Now, that's not always true. Some cards, like if they reprinted Fabled Passage, I would say it's a good reprint, or if they reprinted Arcane Signet, which has been reprinted in the past year, also a good reprint. But just generally, that's a rule of thumb if it's like a generic kind of creature. Next, we have First Response. It's a 4-cost white enchantment, and at the beginning of each upkeep, if you lost life last turn, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So on your, not on your turn, but I guess, yes, on your turn, at the beginning of each person's turn, if the previous turn you lost life, you create a 1/1. This is a reprint, so it's already in the format. I don't need to talk about the implications of it being in the format, but I actually want to talk about the card. I didn't know this existed, and it's pretty cool. I mean, if you have some way to, like, maybe repeatedly just make yourself lose 1 life, and then maybe something like a commander that when a creature ETBs, you gain a life, this is kind of just free creatures. Obviously, that's a little bit of a, ooh, if I have this card and that card and this card, but in a deck that cares about, like, when creatures ETB gain life, I could totally see you running this. Next, we have a new partner. This is Livio, Oathsworn Knight, and it's a 2-cost white legendary creature, human knight. Human knight. It's a 2/2, and you can pay 1 and a white and choose another target creature. Its controller may have it exiled with the divinity counter on it. Then you can pay 2 and a white and tap and return all creatures with a divinity counter on them from exile to the battlefield under their owner's control. So essentially, here's what you can kind of do. You can, first off, play this guy and then just exile all your creatures, then pay 3, tap, and return them all. So it's kind of a mass delayed flicker. What's kind of interesting is most partners, or not partners, commanders that care about flickering either do one of two things. They either exile and then return it right away, or they exile and return it at your end step or some future point. This one can be both, and what's so powerful about that is each one has its own unique opportunities. If you want to flicker something to get its ETB, you may want to do that right now. But if you want to flicker something to avoid a board wipe, you may want to do that later. Now, the issue with this one, obviously, is that Livio himself has to survive. So, you know, dodging board wipes isn't really something he can do. And that is a big issue, is that if you exile all your creatures, and then he dies, you don't get your creatures back until you can recast him. Now, what is very valuable to this card is the fact that it says return all creatures with divinity counters on them, not with divinity counters on them that he put there. Because if it said that, then say you exiled all your creatures to flicker them and then someone killed him at instant speed and you couldn't activate his ability, all your creatures would remain in exile. But if you can, if he's your commander, which he probably is, you can kind of replay him and then activate that ability. So it does kind of let you dodge board wipes where only Livio dies and then you can get back your creatures eventually. And so it kind of creates this interesting game plan where you're just like suspending all your creatures in air, kind of unreachable, until you can go a full rotation around the table with Livio out. And he's a partner, which means you can partner him with other commanders that maybe do interesting things. Another interesting thing you can do is you can choose your opponent's creatures. Now, obviously, that means you can kind of team up with them to get them ETB effects, but also, like, you can almost trick them, which it's not a nice thing to do, but you can say, oh, I'm going to flicker this for you, and then just never choose to do that. So you can kind of just exile things, and, like, they're gone forever. Like, now obviously they get to choose. They can say, no, I don't want that. But that is a very powerful ability. And maybe you throw this with a red commander, and then you start stealing people's stuff, and then you exile it with Livio. I don't know, kind of an interesting idea, but we will have to see what comes of it. I just think it's a very fascinating mono-white commander, and the nice thing is it has partners, so it can actually just not be a mono-white commander. It can be a Selesnya commander, a Azorius commander, and I think that's really powerful. Next, we have Archon of Coronation. It's a 6-cost white creature Archon, 5/5, and it has flying, and it says, when this enters the battlefield, its art becomes blurry. I'm kidding. It says you become the monarch, and as long as you're the monarch, damage doesn't cause you to lose life. So as long as you are the monarch and this is on the battlefield, someone could hit you with a 50-50 and you won't lose life. The issue is they hit you, and while they didn't, like, cause you to lose life, they still did damage because of how the ability is worded, which means that I'm 99% sure they get to become the Monarch, which means you lose this effect. So what this really means is that first strikers are deadly to you, because if they hit you in first strike damage, they become the Monarch, and then now the regular strike damage is actually going to hit you. So that is something to be worried about if you play this, but it's really interesting. Unfortunately, you can't really build a deck around it because it's not legendary and it's a 1 in 100 card, thing, but it is another interesting Archon that looks interesting to play. Next we have Court of Grace. It's a 4-cost white enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. This seems to be part of a cycle. There was a blue one that was called Court of something, and when it ETB'd, you became the Monarch, and then it did an effect every upkeep, and then if you were the Monarch, it did a better version of that effect. And this is very similar. It says, at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. If you're the Monarch, instead create a 4/4, and honestly, a 4-cost enchantment that introduces the Monarch into the game and gives you a free creature at each of your upkeeps, even if it's just a 1/1, is pretty powerful. And while it may not be like CEDH tier, because I'm not really going to talk about that, if I'm playing with my friends, I can play this, and it's a pretty powerful card. And then if I do manage to keep that Monarch, I get 4/4 Angels, which then help me keep the Monarch. So unlike the blue one, where like it's just making your opponents mad by milling them, this one's actually helping you keep the Monarch. So I think it is generally a better card. Also, a 1/1 and a 4/4 are almost the same thing to a sacrifice deck. So if you're playing an Azorius, sacrifice deck, I could totally see you running this card. So yeah, I really like this card. Also, any game that you can add Monarch is wonderful. Next, we have Preordain. It's a 1-cost sorcery. It says scry 2 and draw a card. Very good card. It's actually banned in Modern at the moment. And yeah, it was last reprinted in Mystery Booster, and it just is generally a pretty good filter kind of effect. And with only 60-card limited decks, this can get you 3 cards down in a 60-card deck. Pretty good, and that's all for 1 mana. Next, we have Omen Speaker. It's a 2-cost blue creature human wizard 1/3, and when it enters the battlefield, scry 2. Now, what's really interesting about this is it seems to be hinting more at the scrying as a theme. So it looks like either just mono blue or maybe blue white or blue something is going to care about scrying. And you'll notice that with this next card, which is a card that was actually leaked, but I want to talk about it more here. It is Eligeth Crossroads Augur. It's a 6-cost blue legendary creature Sphinx. I didn't put the partner power and toughness. It's a 5/6. Sorry about that. And it says if you would look at any number of cards while scrying, draw that many instead, and it has partner. First off, I think this could have been a commander without flying and without partner, and it would be a fairly good one. But the fact that it has partner, even if you are forced to use the Prismatic Piper as your partner, makes this card infinitely better. Why? Because it's blue and any other color, or blue and any, combination of 2 colors if you want to mix it with the old partners. This is an insane card that essentially, preordained, scry 2, draw a card. That turns into draw 3 cards for 1 mana, and it's in this set. Obviously, this is a 6-cost, so, that's a little bit insane, but you mix this with green, Simic can get to 6 very quickly. So I would not be surprised if this is a very, very powerful card when you actually play with it. It's very fun because you kind of build your deck in a different way. Your deck all of a sudden becomes about drawing cards and maybe pull in some extra, like when you draw a second card each turn cards. And then you also take cards that are just generally pretty bad because all they're doing is scrying, and that's not awful, but then you turn that into drawing. And what is kind of nice is that if your deck is full of scrying effects, scrying doesn't do nothing. There are some commanders that turn, X effect into Y effect, but X effect is not good, and you don't want to do it without your commander. But I'm fine scrying because if I'm, needing to cast my scry spells, it means I need something, which means scrying is going to almost be the same as drawing a card until I find the card I need, in which case it's slightly worse. So yeah, I think this card works really well. You can partner with something else. For instance, we've seen multiple partners that scry. So you can have this, and then maybe you have a partner that's a 4-cost. You play the 4-cost. A couple turns later, you play Eligeth. There's one that cares about the number of flying creatures you have, and when it attacks, you scry equal to the number of flying creatures that are attacking. So you play this. This is also a flying creature. Really insane card. Probably one of my favorites in the set, and I am really excited to test this out. Next, we have Servo do Laboratorio, or whatever. It's Laboratory Servant. It's a 4-cost, a blue creature zombie horror. It's kind of weird to see in mono blue, but Whatever. At the beginning of each end step, draw a card if you've cast a spell from a graveyard or activated an ability of a card in a graveyard this turn. So just a very good piece in any blue deck that cares about graveyards. This is probably not going in a mono blue deck. I would be very, very surprised if that was the case, unless it's some weird mono blue like escape deck with instants and sorceries, maybe. But, and I guess you can cast instants from your graveyard and sorceries from your graveyard as well, so I guess it's not that ridiculous. But this is a pretty good card in any of those. It's card draw, pretty much one of the most important things to, you know, a commander deck. So I think it is going to be a pretty good card. I don't know how good, but it'll be pretty good. Next, we have Court of Ambition, so another one in the court cycle. It's a 4-cost black enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. So very similar to the other courts, actually exactly like the other courts. And then it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. If you're the monarch, instead each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2. So this one I still think is a really good card. First off, your opponent's discarding a card and losing 3 life every turn. It's not even everyone. If it was everyone, you know, everyone discards a card and then your opponents lose 3 life. That would be a little bit more fair than they lose 3 life unless they discard a card. So it's 3 life or discard a card every single turn. Or if you're the monarch, it's 6 life or 2 cards. And they can't pay 3 life and discard 1 card. It's either 2 cards or 6 life. No in between. I think this one is very similar to the blue one, where it's not helping you keep the monarch, except for the fact that your opponents have less cards, which is more than the blue one does. The blue one literally does nothing to affect you being the monarch. This one stops your opponent from maybe having answers to destroy your creatures, which then makes it harder, you know, if your creatures are destroyed, it's harder to keep the monarch around. But this one's very similarly to the blue one, is just going to make your opponents mad. I kind of wish this cycle didn't affect your opponents. It instead did something for you. That way, it was like, yeah, your opponents want to stop it still because, you know, you're gaining a lot of value, but it's not making them angry, because you being the monarch and making them angry is like double the reason they should attack you. So I'm not saying it's a bad card. I'm just saying, I wish it was designed slightly differently. Like, what if it was, I don't know, you get to sacrifice a creature, and if you do, you get this effect, but if you're the monarch, you don't have to sack a creature, you can just get the effect or something. I think that would have made it a little bit better, but we shall see what comes of this. Maybe I'm just completely wrong. Next, we have Welding Sparks. It's a 3-cost red instant, and it deals X damage to target creature, where X is 3 plus the number of artifacts you control. So, at its worst, if you're picking this up in a draft, because I'm pretty sure that's the only place you are running this card is a draft, this is just a pretty good spell. Like, it's overcosted, yes, and in Commander, you really don't want to be running overcosted stuff, but you're probably playing at least a couple artifacts. Every Commander deck does. I don't think I've ever seen one without an artifact, unless it was specifically a combo deck. So we have, you know, Soul Ring, stuff like that. So I think this is a generally pretty good card. Again, it's a reprint, so I don't really need to be talking about its implications in Commander, but in Limited, I think it could be decent, depending on the number of artifacts in the set. Next, we have Ragareth, Son of Raga. It's a 0-cost legendary creature, Cold Warrior, 0/1 with First Strike, Menace, and Trample, and it has partner. So the idea is this is a creature that you're going to have to do something with, and it's a partner, so you can combine it with anything else, but it can't do anything on its own, and it really is using that partner mechanic to its best. You can play this on turn 0, if you somehow give it flash. So if you had Leyline of Anticipation, you could play this on turn 0, or more likely turn 1. Now, you may not play it on turn 1, but generally you play it on turn 1, turn 2 you cast something to boost it. You have a pretty good creature really early on. I think it is one of the more unique designs, and it is very simple. So, yeah, I think that it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's such an interesting design. It's not just when X happens, do Y. It's how can I build around this and really make this useful. Next, we have Togo, Goblin Weaponsmith. It's a 3-cost red legendary creature, Goblin Artificer. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create an artifact equipment token named Rock. It has equipped creature, has, you know, this ability, pay 1, sacrifice Rock, deal 2 damage to any target, and equip 1. Yeah, that's probably going to be worded slightly different, but essentially, whenever you have a land enter the battlefield, you get a Rock. And this Rock allows you to kind of sacrifice it to deal damage, but only if you equip it. So you're paying 2 mana to deal 2 damage, but you're also getting equipment. And I think that's what's really important here, is that if you're playing with a commander, like the previous one, that cares, not the previous one, in the previous video, there were a couple that cared about, like, equipment, how much is attached to it. You could partner with Pogo, you could get, like, a lot of equipment really fast. You don't have to really worry about pulling equipment, because that's one of the issues in an equipment deck, is how much equipment do you pull, and this is kind of a backup. It's like, oop, I have my, Voltron commander, and then I can equip it with all this stuff, and yeah. But what I'm more interested in is, this clearly isn't a full translation, because deal 2 damage to any target. What is dealing it? Is it rock or the creature? If the creature's dealing it, I think there's a lot more you can do with this. If the rock's doing it, it's like, okay, whatever. But it has partner, so again, kind of have to see what it can partner with to judge it fully. Next, we have Dargo the Shipwrecker. It's a 7-cost red legendary creature giant pirate, and as an additional cost to cast the spell, you may sacrifice any number of artifacts and or creatures. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each permanent sacrifice this way, and 2 less to cast for each other artifact or creature you've sacrificed this turn, and it's a 7/5 with trample. So the idea is, this one really doesn't do anything special on the board, but you can, if you can sacrifice 3 things, or even just get 3 artifacts out on the battlefield, you can pay 1 mana for him. And then every time he dies, you just have to sacrifice more artifacts. Now, what's interesting is you don't have to sacrifice the artifact to him. And I think that's what makes this so fascinating. If it was just sacrifice artifacts or creatures, then I would say this is really lame. You're just sacrificing artifacts, maybe you get some triggers off of it, and that's about it. But if you sack treasures, for instance, every treasure you sacrifice for him gives you 3 mana. Because you're going to sack the treasure for 1, and then you're going to cast him, and an artifact's been sacrificed, 2 cheaper, and now you've kind of paid for 3 mana. Now, he works really well with the previous guy, who, when a land ETBs you get a rock, you can sacrifice, and so you can either pay the ability to sacrifice it, or just sacrifice it straight with Dargo. You get a pretty big creature. You're probably running an equipment deck because you got a pretty big creature, and that's like the whole point of the deck. So yeah, I actually think Dargo and the previous card could work pretty well together. Next, we have Wheel of Misfortune. It's a 3-cost red sorcery, and it says each player secretly chooses a number, then reveals those numbers. Wheel of Misfortune deals damage equal to the greatest chosen number to each player that chose it. Then, each player who didn't choose the smallest number discards their hand and draws 7. So this one's a little bit more like what? But I'm going to break it down. Essentially, you're going to cast this. Each person's going to secretly choose a number. The person who chose the highest number is dealt damage equal to that number. The person who chose the lowest number does not get anything. Nothing happens with the spell. And then everyone else at the table is going to do a Wheel of Fortune effect. So what this does is it kind of does a guessing game. And depending on your situation, you may want to do different things. So you probably never want to be the highest number. But you may want to be the lowest number. For instance, if you like your hand, you may be fighting to be the lowest number. And so that's why this card is so unreliable. It's not like everyone wants to be like one thing. It's not A or B and everyone wants B, and so you're trying to figure that out. It's A, B, and C. No one wants A, but some people may want C, but some people may want B. So you kind of have to look around at the table. If someone has one card, you know they're going to go for an extremely low number because they don't want a wheel. So if you want a wheel, you may just guess a pretty average number, but not one that's too high. So you can probably guess like -5 and you might be fine, because if I was me and I did not want to wheel, I would guess -1,000,002, and as long as I chose the smallest number, so each player who didn't choose the smallest number discards their hand and draws 7. So yeah, it's an interesting game where if you want to wheel, you kind of have to not guess too low, not guess too high. If you don't want to wheel, you gotta kind of guess the lowest number. So that's kind of interesting. Now, what is also interesting is that the person who has dealt damage also wheels. So there's literally only one person who's not going to wheel. And I wonder what the rules are on this. Can I name, like, if I know more numbers, can I just guarantee that I name the lowest number? Like, I don't know. Are you allowed to go in the negatives? I would assume so, because then everyone could just pick 0 and they would be, all tied, either tied for greatest and then everyone wheels and no one takes damage, or they like are in the negatives. But then what happens if everyone chooses negative numbers? Like, what happens if I choose -1, someone chooses -5, and then a couple other people choose -7? So the person who chose the biggest number would be the person who chose -1. So they lose -1 life, so they gain a life. So does that mean if everyone is trying not to wheel and everyone chooses -10,000,000, that someone would gain 10,000,000 life? I don't know if this card actually works like this. This could just be a mistranslation. I think there are too many issues with this. You could very easily coordinate with someone saying, hey, let's just, you choose negative 10 million and we're all going to choose like bigger numbers, or, someone could gain control of someone's turn, for instance. I just don't really see this happening. And then if you're looking at this in a 1v1 perspective, one person's about to take a ton of damage or gain a bunch of life, I guess. And then everyone's going to wheel, and this card has too many things about it that I don't think it's actually going to work like this. But this is the translation we have. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Are you not allowed to choose negative numbers? If so, this card just becomes everyone chooses 0. Unless you want to wheel, you're going to choose 1. Next, we have Jessica's Will. It's a 3-cost red sorcery. It says choose 1. If you control a commander as you cast a spell, you may choose both. So this is very similar to the other Will cycle. It has that exact text, but the abilities are different, obviously. It says tap, add a red for each card in target opponent's hand. So if someone has a bunch of cards, you get a bunch of mana. And then it also says exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. Honestly, a 3-cost draw 3 cards would not be bad, but a 3-cost draw 3 cards, you must play them this turn, because you do have to pay that 3 and then still have mana left over. But the idea is, if you have your commander, you get both. So you get the mana and you get the cards. Generally, this card's going to be a really great inclusion. Why? Because most times you're going to cast this, your opponents are going to have more than 3 cards in hand, which means this card is kind of free. And if you have your commander out, then it replaces itself and is a free card and probably generates you mana. This card's really good. I think it'll see a lot of play, especially in decks that have that 0-cost commander, that they can play their commander, like, okay, turn 2, right? Turn 1, Soul Ring and Mountain. Turn 2, I know this is kind of magical Christmas land, but whatever. You play a mountain, you pay for your 0-cost commander that we literally just saw, and then you cast the spell. Everyone probably has 6 or 7 cards in hand, so you probably generate 7 mana on turn 2 using this card. And so even if, by the way, even if your opponent doesn't have, 7, even if you don't get out your commander, this card on turn, 3 or 2 can just generate you a ton of mana. And kind of accelerate you into the game. Think about it. Someone has 7 cards in hand because they're not drawing well. You benefit off of that by essentially being able to, say you are playing a really expensive commander, a 7-cost commander, turn 2, you can get that with this card. I think this card is ridiculously insane. And then it also has that card draw effect on top of it. Yikes. I think this one's a little too powerful. Next, we have Jessica, Thrice Reborn. It's a 3-cost red legendary planeswalker Jessica, 0 loyalty, and it enters the battlefield with a loyalty counter on it for each time you cast a commander from the command zone this game. So if she is your commander, which she can be, she'll enter with 1 loyalty. But she has partners. You could cast the other commander first and then have her enter the battlefield. And then she has an ability. It's 0, choose target creature until your next turn. If that creature would deal combat damage to one of your opponents, it deals triple that damage instead. And then minus X, it deals X damage to each of up to 3 creatures, or targets, not even creatures. Sorry, you can hit planeswalkers and all sorts of things. This card's really good. I think with that 0-cost commander, for instance, it's also pretty good. I mean, you cast it turn 1, maybe it dies. Cast it turn 2, maybe it dies. You cast Jessica, she enters with 3 loyalty. She can kind of deal just 9 damage there, that turn, if she wanted to, die, or she could deal 6 damage and then be able to start tripling damage. So I think this card's really, really good, and something that should be watched out for with cheap commanders that can easily be cast. Unfortunately, you do have to cast it from the command zone. Actually, probably fortunately. Otherwise, you could do some weird shenanigans of, bouncing things and recasting it. So, yeah, we're lucky that's the case, but yikes, this is going to be pretty rough. Or, she could really easily... Oh, that's not a partner. If you were, and that's in the wrong colors. I guess there are maybe not too many ways to do it, but maybe that card that lets you sack things to reduce the cost, you can just get a lot of stuff. I don't know. We'll have to see. Next, we have Gift of Paradise. It's a 3-cost green enchantment aura, enchant land, and when it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life, and then tap, add 2 mana of any color is given to the land. So it ramps you, it gains you life, it's okay. It's good in enchantment decks, it's good in decks that care about maybe your green devotion, but that's about it. Next, we have Hunter's Insight. This is a reprint from Jumpstart, so it was just reprinted, but this is the first time it has this art. And it is a 3-cost green instant, and it says choose target creature you control. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, this turn draw that many cards. So if you have an 8/8 cast this on it, you're going to gain 8 cards. Pretty good. We have Belbay, Corrupted Observer. It's a black and a green for a legendary creature zombie elf. And at the beginning of each player's post-combat main phase, that player adds colorless for each of your opponents who lost life. Damage causes loss of life. So if you can manage to hit 3 of your opponents, boom, you get 6 mana. Pretty good. She can pay for herself, kind of. The issue is it gives it to all your opponents. So this is going to be run in a deck that can either, like, prevent combat damage, or, like, it's really hard to hit you, or you can, like, flicker her in some way so she's not around on your opponent's turn. I don't know. There's probably some interesting ways you can do this, and I'm sure there are some fun cards that can be combined. I don't think it's the most interesting, but I think it does have some cool cards that can mix with it. Next, we have Ludovic. He's a reprint, and at the beginning of each player's end step, that player may draw a card if a player other than you lost life this turn, so this kind of incentivizes you to swing at everyone else. You are giving them card draw, but you're also saying, hey, don't swing at me, and, you also get rewarded for attacking. This is a reprint from Commander 2016, and it's going for about $7 US on Card Kingdom. This is one of the foil-etched ones, and yeah. Next, we have Zur the Enchanter. It's 1 and an Esper for a legendary creature, human wizard, 1/4 with flying, and when it attacks, you may search your library for an enchantment card with CMC 3 or less and put it onto the battlefield. If you do, shuffle your library. Very powerful effect. You can get most effects with enchantments CMC 3 or less. That could be an Oblivion Ring, it could be a lot of different things. It was last reprinted in Modern Masters, and it's going for about $5, so it's not like a needed reprint, but it is definitely one of those commanders that more people are going to get their hands on because of this. Another interesting thing is that, also probably not actually, because these are the foil etched ones, so they're probably going to be more expensive than those prices there, but another thing to note, this is the art from a Judge promo, and that's the only time it's been used, so it's kind of cool to see that on a non-Judge promo card. Next, we have Path of Ancestry. It's a land. It enters tapped, and you can tap to add 1 mana of any color that's in your commander's color identity. And then if you cast a creature that shares a creature type with your commander, you get to scry. So a little advantage there. It's kind of a command tower that enters the battlefield tapped and gives you a little bit of extra scry bonus. And then we have this Myriad Landscape. It's a land that enters the battlefield tapped. Tap to add a colorless, and then you can pay 2, tap, and search your library for up to 2 basics, put them onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. So it's kind of cool. It's not my favorite land, but it definitely fits in certain decks. And that's it for today. So if you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful, hit that like button. Subscribe to see these. I'm doing them every day of spoilers, except for maybe the weekend. Sometimes they slow down, sometimes they don't. If it's only like 1 card on Saturday, I may combine Saturday and Sunday into 1 video on Sunday. But other than that, every day I'll be doing videos covering it after, all the spoilers are over. And yeah, I also do awesome other content, so you guys should check that out. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.